The following podcast is brought to you by Cast Content Media.
Welcome to Dixie
And the King. I'm an Elvis tribute artist, rocking the cradle with a much younger wife.
and we are coming together to figure out this thing called life.
Take this journey with us through our unique and fascinating relationship as we tackle marriage, parenting, and spirituality.
We find ways to live a better life through our experiences and learn from professionals and everyday folks along the way and how to thrive in today's world.
And welcome to another episode of Dixie and the King. My name is George, and this is my beautiful wife, Dixie. And we want to thank you so much for tuning us in. We have had some amazing podcasts, and the last one with Larry Geller was pretty cool. I got to admit that. But before we get into who we have coming up now, I do want to thank CastContentMedia.com for sponsoring our podcast. If you're interested in doing your own podcast and you're in the area, we'd love to talk with you about that. We provide all the equipment and do all the editing. Just makes it real simple. You just need to show up and add the content. So other than that, we also can be found on our website, which is
DixieandtheKing.com, and I found out that I'm a little more tech savvy than I knew. So this whole time I thought we were on 2 podcast platforms. Turns out we're on like all of them.
Oh, wow.
So whatever or however you like to listen to your favorite podcast, you can tune us in.
Yep, even Alexa. You can go to Alexa and say, Alexa, play Dixie and the King podcast, and it'll pop right up. I don't know how they search for a particular podcast, though. That I don't know. I don't know if they can ask them for...
Yeah, you can ask for specific episodes. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Or the latest episode, however you want to do it.
Yeah. Probably the easiest way, we also have a YouTube channel, which is Dixie and the King. You can go there and see all of our podcasts. You can even find our very first one, which was basically just a grocery list of who we are and all that kind of fun stuff. So, anyway, we are so excited to welcome our next guest. Now, as everybody knows, this is, I guess we can say, this is March of 2021. And
right.
We are into, a full year, pretty much, of the COVID lockdown. So I'm going to have my beautiful wife, Dixie, introduce our guest.
Yeah, so I just wanted to look at the past year. So my kids have just started their spring break. They'll be on spring break this next week, and I just was reflecting back last year when I sent my kids, or when I brought my kids home from spring break. I had no idea they wouldn't be returning to school. It really breaks my heart, like what's happened over the last year. And so I know that George and I can really talk about the impact that has had on our kids from a parent's point of view, and the struggles that we've had for the last year, just with me working from home, raising a toddler, and educating my kids at home, and having them go back in school and back out of school and back in school. But I really wanted to actually talk with an educator. So today we have Miss Ashley VanSlyke with us, and she has actually taught my oldest daughter in 2 grades and has now moved on to a different school district, but we adore her. So welcome, Ashley.
Thank you.
So give us a little background on who is Ashley. How long have you been teaching, and why would you want to be a teacher?
Well, this is my 6th year teaching. I was at Pete Marich in LaSalle for 5 years and just started a new school. I moved to University Elementary this year to teach 3rd grade. I started teaching 1st grade. I did a couple years in 2nd grade, and then last year I jumped to 5th. So I've had a little bit of everything. I wanted to be a teacher just because I had great teachers when I was in elementary school, and I love learning. I've always been a lifelong learner, and still like to learn today. And so it's fun being in the field of education because it's always something new. We're always learning how to improve, and just really enjoy it.
Yeah, and your passion for teaching really does come through everything that you do. And I can say that from personal experience. You have probably been my oldest favorite teacher. And I was so sad when you moved on because my little one would have been coming up in your class. But
George told me that he told my new principal I was no longer going to be moving there.
Yeah, I mean, we were gonna really throw a fit about it, but we're so excited for you and your new adventures. But I just kind of wanted to get into, so with the kids learning at home, as a parent, working from home, it's really been a struggle. We went from, and I just see my oldest who thought that she hated school. She would cry every day going to school, thought that she wanted to be homeschooled. And to have her be the first to come to me and say, Mom, I miss school. I just want to go back to school, was odd. And it just really struck me as to how important the classroom really is for our kids. And I think there's been a lot of things on social media about parents thinking that the school is their daycare, and now parents are going to have to step up and actually parent their kids. And I just don't agree with that at all. I know my strengths, and I'm not a teacher for a reason. I work in the field of child protection, so I definitely deal with, kids with learning disabilities, and I'm an advocate in the school, and I've worked closely with schools. But I'm not a teacher, and I just think that it takes a special skill set. Plus, they're not only getting the education from the classroom, but it's really that building those social skills that they're going to need for the future. Yep. So what have you seen now that, we're lucky, we're back in school, and I think you're back in school as well. What have you seen as like the biggest impact this has had on kids?
Yeah, I think you said it as far as the social skills. I think it was very hard being remote for kids to have to be at home with their siblings, or if some of them didn't have siblings, they didn't have anybody at home. And so to come back into a school where they have to figure out basically how to be a friend again and how to be a student in the classroom and be a classmate again has been difficult for some kids, just in some things I've seen. But on the other side of it, like the excitement to be back in the classroom is phenomenal. I actually just posted on Facebook yesterday. Yesterday was the first day I got to put desks into groups, which is a very little simple thing that, I didn't think about last year, but they were so excited to be able to sit right next to another classmate and not be in arm's length. Like the talking was crazy. They wanted to talk the whole day, but when do they get the opportunity to be that close to each other? It's been a year, today that we went home. And so I think like the social piece has been huge. And that's part of school. It's not just the learning piece of, math and literacy and things like that, but it's also how do you be a good person, and teaching those life skills too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of concern because, kids are such social little butterflies, and they really need that interaction outside of the home. I mean, we have our family dynamics and habits and ways of communicating, which typically as parents it involves yelling mostly.
We are not yellers.
We really don't yell. And the kids are actually pretty well behaved. Our issues are so minor, but I guess for me there's that concern, and of course you can read articles, and it seems like they're really not touching much on this, is how much have the kids lost over this last school year and the beginning part of this one without that social interaction. And maybe you've read some studies or you've seen something, and how different is that now that they're back together?
As far as the social interaction goes, I saw a little bit more at the beginning of the year where it was just kind of hard for them to get back into like the groove of being around friends. But I don't know. I wouldn't say that the social interaction piece was that big of a difference, because kids are resilient. And so when they're around other kids, they figure it out. And I think it's a little different for adults. I think for me, going back to work after being isolated, it was harder for me as an adult to be around other adults. And just from a teacher perspective, they want everybody to be distanced, not just the kids, but also the adults. And so I think it's impacted teachers, honestly, more with the isolation than it has the kids, because they can really pick up and change things a lot quicker than we can.
Okay. So now that we've talked about that aspect of it, let's get into the educational aspects of them missing so much school, because a lot was really passed on to the parents, particularly with the social learning. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to think how much school did they miss before they got their Chromebooks and started doing social? Do you remember?
I don't think they missed really anything. No, I know that our school was really great at getting everybody a Chromebook, because that's what I think with my child welfare background, the thing that I am most concerned about and what I see is, okay, my kids were lucky enough that in my job, I was also working from home and I could be home, that I'm somewhat tech savvy and could help. And as stressful as it was for me, because what ended up happening is, Grace is downstairs in her bedroom doing school. Holly is upstairs at my desk doing school. And I'm on the middle floor chasing my toddler and trying to do Zoom meetings and doing work from home. And so I ended up getting a lot of steps in, going up and down the stairs, making sure everybody was on what they were supposed to be on. But I just thought about what happens with the kids whose parents don't get to stay home to work, because there's a lot of jobs out there where that's not an option. And so what about those kids? What about the kids that don't have great internet at home? And I know the school district did everything they possibly could to bridge that gap.
And I think a lot of the local internet providers actually came out with some fairly inexpensive packages.
Right.
But still
and I think about okay, so my grandma watches our kids sometimes when I'm at work. She doesn't have the ability to help them with online school. I barely figured it out. So, coming back, talking about the educational aspect of it, do you see more of a gap in those kids who might have a parent at home to really be helping with them, and those kids that didn't get that?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's a huge equity issue. And that was one of the things, having to learn from home. It was, well, these kids don't have parents that are sitting next to them and able to help them all the time. And even for the kids that do have a parent at home, they do have jobs and they have younger siblings. I actually heard that a lot of high schoolers were having to go out and find jobs, so they weren't doing school. But in the case of the pandemic, they need food. They need, to be able to pay for things. And so school was kind of put on the back burner, I think, in some cases. And I think that it goes back to equity. We were able to provide our students and be one-to-one with Chromebooks. And I think the technology of where our nation is, and specifically our school district, was very beneficial to our families. But you could definitely tell the students that were able to have a parent there with them and to keep them on track as compared to the students that didn't. There's definitely a gap there.
So that brings the question of, where are our kids now, education-wise? Are they far behind? Is it something that we can, assuming there's not another lockdown or anything, but is this something that they can catch up to? I guess I'm assuming by my question is that they're not exactly where they should be for that particular grade level.
Yeah, I think we have to keep in mind that kids are sponges. They soak up so much information and so quickly. And the other great thing is so many school districts use curriculums where the teaching spirals. They might have missed something in April, but they got it again in September when they came back to school at a smaller scale. And I also feel, specifically for me as a teacher, I last year with my fifth graders did a lot of more blended learning and through that more personalized learning. And I think being able to do that, teachers are able to better reach students more one-on-one and help them catch up a little bit more. But I think it's important that they're sponges. I don't think that They can't come back from, the gaps that we might see here and there, but also keeping in mind how great teachers are at their jobs, and being able to assess kids and know this is where they're at, and I know the steps I need to get them there. We know our kids better than anybody else does. And if you think about it, in a normal school year, we spend more time with our kids than their own parents do. And so just really keeping that in mind, we can target where they're at. We can target what they need, but I don't think the gap is too large.
Did you have to change your curriculum because
No, we didn't. So we were actually able to move forward. I think that first week after spring break, we spent the week kind of more as a review week, and kind of because we thought we were going to come back. And so it was like, let's just put what we're learning the following week on the back burner. We're going to be coming back. And then when that didn't happen, it was like, okay, we have to push forward with material, because where are these fifth graders going to be when they become sixth graders next year? And how can we make sure that those gaps aren't there? At our school district, the one I was at last year, they have the same curriculum K through 8. So those fifth graders were still going to be getting that same material in sixth grade, which I think is also huge. I think it goes back to the makeup of a district, and how those schools are aligned. And I think that's what helps support those gaps from widening in pandemics like the ones we're experiencing.
Well, and I think that's what I've experienced, is just how amazing our teachers really are, because, and we chose to move to a small town to be in a small school district. Like that really informed our decision on where we moved to. And I can tell you that every single teacher in the building knows who my kids are. And they really know my kids. They know what they struggle with. They know what gives them anxiety. They know what motivates them. And I know that it's not just my kids, it's every kid in that building. And I have just been so grateful that they take the time, and I know you especially did, and I'm assuming all the teachers that you work with are the same, to really get to know these kids on an individual level, so that you can really, take care of their basic needs first, because they're not going to learn if they're sad and anxious or hungry or whatever the deal might be. And so I've just really appreciated that. I know there's been a lot of harsh words out there for teachers as well. If you just look at social media and the news, there's just this whole like parent versus teachers. And I just think that is not something that we experience here. And I would venture to guess that the majority of America does not experience that our teachers and our parents are really on the same team, and we're all there to help our kids. One question I do have is, if you do watch the news, and for folks out there wondering, and maybe folks that don't have kids in school or grandkids in school right now, you hear a lot about these teacher unions like refusing to go back to school. And I'm just curious, like from your perspective and the things that you're seeing with teachers, that does not seem to be something that we're dealing with here, at least.
No, I definitely don't see that. And actually, we at the school I'm currently at right now, we want to get back to normal. We want to get our kids back in the building. We've started having conversations about next year. What does next year look like? And we want to be back to normal. We like being at school. We like being able to work physically with kids, and not virtually. And I think part of that is kind of a control thing. We're able to control what they're doing in the classroom and making sure that they're doing the things they need to be doing to make sure they're learning. But I think the other side of it is teaching is not an independent job. It's not something you do by yourself. Teaching is done in teams, and it's done with other educators, and you improve working with other educators. And so I think for a lot of us, it's been awful this year. We don't get to plan with our other teachers in the same room. And that's been really difficult, because I don't feel like I'm as great of a teacher if I'm not able to problem solve and work with other teachers. We've been doing it on Zoom, But I think going back to school and being back in school in person and having all the regular normal routines is what's going to help our kids the most, and really what's going to help us as educators to continue to improve in our own jobs.
Interesting. So with everything that went down, are there a couple positives that came out of this that can help you in how you teach kids, or maybe it's just on the technology side of it?
Yeah, I think the technology is probably one of the biggest things. I think it's an awareness for us that the world is so tech savvy that we need to make sure we're advocating for our students and also introducing them to things that they're going to need later on, which is a 21st century skill, and it's built into our state standards. So it aligns very, very nicely there. So I would say technology is great. I think another positive for me, it felt like relationships with my students actually improved being online, which is kind of weird because they're in their homes and I'm by myself. But I met with a lot of kids one-on-one, and more so I would say like the last couple months when we were quarantined, like the November to January time, I was able to set up individual meetings with kids once a week. And some kids, it was more than that. It was whatever they were struggling with. And not necessarily was it always academic either, but just being able to see their faces and talk to them. And just, again, Dixie, you said it about the relationship piece. You know, I think that the last school I was at where your girls are, that was one thing that we ingrained in our teachers was make sure that you have a relationship with those kids and you know about their personal lives before you start to teach them. You should know about their interests and their likes. And so I think that's been really cool coming out of it is I feel like I've developed deeper relationships with my students. Again, it seems weird, but it just felt like there was more one-on-one time because they had that screen.
So I'll ask you this one, since you were home mostly and you were at times like the teacher. What did you get out of all this that can help you and me to be better parents when it comes to our kids' education?
Oh, that's a tough one. You know what I will say that came out of it for me is, although I feel like I had a great appreciation for my kids' teachers, it's even deeper. At the end of the day, there were some days that I was in tears, honestly, because I had my own full-time job. I have a 1-year-old. I had
a dog.
2 girls, and they have both given me permission to share this, but they have both, we've just discovered that they're dyslexic. And so trying to navigate online learning with that was awful. My oldest one did much better. She's got a little more of those adaptive skills, but my 8-year-old, my 3rd grader, really struggled. And she is a social butterfly. She is my one that goes to school for friends, not for school. And I just saw how much it really affected and hurt them. And no matter how much I tried to learn the material and do it, like even math is just taught so much differently than I learned it. And one thing the girls' school did several years back, I remember when Grace was even in 1st grade, is they brought in the parents and did a class, which I thought was fantastic because I'm like, oh, okay, now I get why you're teaching it this way.
We still don't like it. I'm just going to throw it.
I don't like it, but I get it. I understand the concept. And so I don't have to like it. I understand the concept, but I'm not good at it, right? I went into the social work field for a reason. I am not good. Like my 3rd graders math right now, I'm like, I don't know. So I'm YouTubing it and things like that. So I just have such a huge appreciation for what those teachers do. And for me to try to navigate my schedule, my oldest, my little one, and how much I'm like freaked out about it. And teachers, they have a room full of 20, 25 kids and they're doing it all day long. And so I just really appreciate what they do for our kids.
Yeah, well, I think it goes the other way too. I think teachers I especially was very thankful and appreciative of parents too. And I think that's another positive too. I think that parent and teacher relationships actually improved. There were a lot of parents that I reached out to and talked to during the at home order last spring, but also this winter, I feel like it improves parent-teacher relationships. So
that's really great to hear, because I just think, if folks just sit back and listen to the news all day long, I don't think that they're hearing what's actually happening in their own communities. And I know for me, I'm just really hoping things get back to normal too, because because I work full time, I made sure that I was a parent that went to all the field trips and things like that. And I really miss going on field trips and doing just those things that you took for granted before all of this.
Yeah, our field trips during this whole lockdown was we take a field trip down into the basement, and then we took a field trip up into Carson's room, which aren't as fun, and they're very short too. They don't last very long. But
right.
we're just looking forward to getting the kids back in, and of course your insight are there things I think we learned also as parents, but I'll get some advice from you. Are there things that parents, because of what we learned over this whole thing, that can help with their child? Whether it's, I think the technology thing, I think we all pretty much figured that thing out. But as far as getting them learning and excited about school, are there things that you've learned through this whole thing? Or maybe some suggestions that parents could be more involved with?
I think the biggest thing is just that communication, and making sure that you're really advocating for your kid, because when you're at home or your child is at home and the teacher's not right there, they don't know exactly everything that your child is struggling with. I felt like I would send something for kids to work on and then wait and see if I had any questions. And if I didn't have questions, I would just assume that the kids got it and understood it. So I think the communication is huge. I read an article this morning actually that I think or had mentioned that parents were doing a great job with communicating to their teachers of, hey, I'm noticing that my child is struggling with this. Next time you meet with them, can you maybe work on that with them? And it's not, a slap in the face of the teacher. They didn't understand it, but it's something that we in school, if they were in person, we would see that. But they're at home. There's so many things that we're not seeing. And so I think it's just communication.
Yeah, I'm also hearing that some parents, particularly those that were fortunate enough to had a parent that was working at home, and I can't even imagine. I mean, if Dixie wasn't able to be home, this would have been a mess for us, and I can't imagine what it is for others. But I'm hearing that some of those people that were stay-at-home parents that were helping their kids virtually have also looked at not necessarily moving to a home school, but actually adding a little bit of homeschool curriculum in addition to what they're learning at the district. Have you heard anything about this or suggestions to that?
I haven't really. I'm sure parents are looking for ways to supplement and support learning, because I think parents are worried about that gap. I think one thing that we did as a school was really try to get parents and teachers to understand that, hey, this is also a time for you to do non-academic things and to build relationships with your families too, which is something that we don't have time for other than in the summer. So it was kind of like, go cook a recipe with your parents, go on a nature walk with your parents and your siblings. And so I think it's also figuring out how to embed those things now into our normal lives when we do get back in school and things are normal again. I think that's a huge teaching point moving forward too.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's something that we really tried to do was I had the kids meal plan with me, cook a recipe so they're getting like those fractions and how to read them and then what that actually looks like. So I do think that there's a lot of learning that goes on and that's not necessarily in the classroom. So that's a really great point.
Another aspect of this too, and I don't know if your school or if the district that you're working for has also talked about this. One of the benefits of having kids go to school is, as teachers, you guys are kind of the front line to see if there's any issues for those kids. And, we can all imagine what those are. We've probably heard a lot, from anywhere from abuse to nutritional aspects that were being neglected. Have you in the district had conversations about, as these kids slowly start to come into in-person schooling, some issues to look for and how you're going to handle those in a positive way?
I don't think there's been a whole lot of communication about that, just because I think we as educators are really good on picking up on those cues anyways.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that it's necessarily a new conversation. I did a lot of home visits though in the spring, and also in the winter when we were just at home, and just kind of knowing background of your kids, where they come from, and not only for parents to communicate with their teachers, but just teachers getting to know kids' backgrounds and their home lives is so important. When they're in person, we see all of those things. When they're at home, we see it online. And so I think there's some aspect that we can still see, when we're working online, but I wouldn't say it's really a new teaching point for us.
No, and I will say, because I used to work at the county at that level, our teachers were the number one reporters, because you guys are mandated reporters of child abuse and neglect. And I do know that the county and I think the nation as a whole saw a huge decrease in reports during the pandemic. So I know as child protection workers, it was really concerning for us, just because there aren't so many eyes on these kids every day. So I think on that aspect, I'm also excited for kids to get back in the classroom, to just get the support that they need, and for families to get the support that they need. It's not, I always think about child protection has such a negative connotation, but really not out there to separate kids and families. It's just to provide whatever support that they need, and the goal is to keep kids and families and to support parents and being successful at doing that. And teachers really are a huge piece of that puzzle. And so, yeah.
I think even when we were online, if I noticed something, it was, I'm going to reach out to our counselor and see what our counselor can do moving forward. So it's not like that was completely halted, but it just felt like we didn't have as much of a hand in it as we should have, because we weren't there. We didn't see it firsthand, of what was going on. But I think that even when we're online, we were constantly, worried for specific students. You never know what their home life is like. And sometimes school is the biggest constant for them. So to have that gone and to have that structure and routine gone was scary.
And I just want to real quickly, you touched earlier on the equity piece, which I think is huge. And coming into April is we start the state standardized testing. I know for me as a parent, because I can and because of what my children are dealing with right now, is I've opted out of the state standardized testing this year. For us, it does nothing but create anxiety in my kids. And I'm just wondering, from an educator's point of view, with everything that's gone on in the last year, how are teachers feeling about beginning to administer these tests?
I think there's an overwhelming sense of frustration. I think that we know our kids are not where we want them to be. And so I think for us, having to give a test just will verify what we're saying. And I also think that, and I mentioned it already, but we do a great job as teachers knowing where our kids are and constantly testing our kids. And, they didn't get that lesson. I'm going to have to work with them a little bit more on this concept. I don't see a purpose for administering a test that is going to tell us what we already know. And I think the biggest thing is funding. I think that the state as a whole sees it as an aid to funding, but it brings up questions because last year we didn't take the test and schools still got funded. So I think it's just, again, we know what's going to happen. We know the outcome. We know how our kids are going to do, but we don't use that measure to only assess where kids are. We have multiple pinpoints of data to say this is where kids are. This is where they need to be moving forward.
Very good. Was there in this whole experience of doing the virtual teaching, and in your classroom you had how many kids, would you say?
In the spring, I feel like my numbers were down. I would say there was probably 3/4 of my kids that were doing things. By May, it probably tailored off to half of them, because it's nice outside and, they're getting to do fun things. I would say recently in the winter, I had almost all my kids online every day doing lessons. And I think part of that's because parents figured out how to do it, and how to make it work for kids. So it got better this year, but.
So on your laptop, you had, what,
20.
25 little faces looking back at you?
Yep, I had 22. Yep.
Okay, so just as something that's fun, can you tell us just a couple little instances where something was going on in the background where you're kind of going, oh, I can't believe I just saw what I did?
Had any crazy stories? I did have one kid who took his laptop, his Chromebook, he put it on the table, and he laid down and fell asleep. And then that same student did put the Chromebook on his table a couple days later and walked away and never came back. And so I think it was like, yep, I got logged on. You can mark me present. So it was more things like that.
Yeah, I know. Speaking of that, my third grader, because my desk is in my bedroom, which is where I've set up my little office. And so when I would be down either on my own meeting or checking on her sister, I would come upstairs and she's like snuggled into my bed. And I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. You need to get out of the bed and sit at the desk. Yeah. So, they do funny things.
Yeah, they do.
Well, good. I bet it's just got to feel so good for the teachers to get back in and get the kids back into learning. And hopefully this is a one-time thing, as we continue forward with whatever. But for me, it was a huge eye-opener on a couple of instances is exactly what teachers do. The curriculum, because we had to turn into teachers. Well, actually, she was more of a teacher, working through the technology. So aside from all the negative stuff that went on, there's a lot of positives that actually came out of this. And I think moving forward, I think we're going to do better. I really do.
I think so too.
Good.
Is there anything else you would want our listeners to know from an educator's point of view? Just anything that's going on or anything you want to share?
I don't really think so. I mean, again, I think it's just the teachers' hearts right now are to be normal again, and to not have to deal with like the constant worry that your class is going to be quarantined, and what do you do if it happens on the fly? And just, I think that overarching anxiety is really stressful for teachers. And so everybody's like, let's go back to normal. The rest of the world is moving towards that normal phase, and we're ready to do the same.
Very good.
Yes, I just want to thank you so much for everything that you do and all of the teachers out there. I just thank you so much, because we couldn't do this without you. I don't want to be a teacher. I like being a mom. There is that different relationship, and I have an 11-year-old right now, and all of a sudden, moms start to not know things when they turn 11. So my 8-year-old still thinks I'm pretty smart, but my 11-year-old's not sure. So I just really thank you for the relationships that you have with our kids and all the work that you do with them. Yeah.
And we're so fortunate to live in a community that has a good school district and good schools. You read stories about some of the other areas, the bigger cities primarily, that are really struggling. So anyway, Ashley, thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Yes.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was a good podcast. That was a good one to follow up with Larry Geller, Elvis's hairdresser, I think.
I think so.
It was either that one or else we're going to be talking to a dental hygienist about plaque. So maybe we'll follow that one up behind Ashley. But anyway, you've been watching and listening to Dixie and the King, and you can find us on our website, which is
dixieandtheking.com and all of your favorite podcast platforms. Don't forget that we're on YouTube, and hit that subscribe button.
Yes, that really helps us out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, tune in, Apple, Spotify, Rumble.
All of them. If you have your favorite podcast platform that you cannot find us on, please send us an email at contact@dixieandtheking.com, and I will do my very best.
We're also looking for ideas. If there's something you want, a subject you want to see us cover, we'd love to have your suggestions. So we've gotten quite a few of those, so we really appreciate that. But if there's something that you think, man, I'd really like to see George's opinion on that, or Dixie's opinion, or maybe it's something silly, you want to see a skydive or something.
I don't know about skydiving.
No. I'm a scuba diver, but not skydiver. Even a recipe. We had somebody that wants to watch us cook. A future podcast will be, my wife Dixie is a fitness competitor, so she's starting to get into the mode of getting buff and getting her routine down to where she bounces around on the stage for 2 minutes doing strength moves like one-arm push-ups and tumbling, that kind of fun stuff. So that's going to be a great journey as well, because when she goes on that, I go on that. So anyway.
No, he goes on the sneaking food in the garage, or that sort of thing.
We support the Girl Scouts and their cookies. So anyway, we really appreciate you tuning in, and until next time, God bless.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Dixie and the King. We know there are possibly millions of podcasts out there, and we really appreciate you landing on ours.
We'd love to hear back from you with suggestions, episode ideas, and possible guests. If you'd like to connect to our guests, we would love to share their contact info with you.
Feel free to tell a friend and share our podcast with them.
To learn more and watch past podcasts, please visit our website, dixieandtheking.com.